Take a pit stop for all things NASCAR with the 4 Tire Change podcast. Here is your host, Dawson Iserloh.
4 Tire Change podcast on ESPN Southwest Louisiana is back. 1 week off, but we have a lot to talk about. Dawson Iserloh with you here as we're going to go through this race at the Indy Motor Speedway, the Brickyard 400. First time back on the oval in a long time. Went to the road course for a handful of years there, and they're back on the oval, which I'm very thankful for. As for the racing we saw yesterday, I don't know what to make of it. There was a lot that went down, especially at the end, and I don't mean to make this an officiating rant because all in all, and those of you who have tuned into this podcast know, I generally like to kind of side with NASCAR on most of these things because I know how hard it is to make these calls right in the moment. And I think in general, they have their best intentions in play, and sometimes it's just really hard to officiate it live. That being said, I did take exception to a little bit of the way the race was called yesterday, and I'll get into that in a minute. But appreciate everybody coming out. Schedule-wise, did want to do a little bit of cleanup here for the future schedule. Olympic break is actually happening. We're going to have 2 weeks off on the NASCAR Cup Series schedule, so we will be off as well for those 2 weeks. Kind of didn't even really remember this portion, the way they were going to break it up with the Olympics, so it'll work out. We'll have kind of a mid-season, reset, and then we'll be full steam ahead towards the playoffs. So with all that being said, appreciate everybody for tuning in. So yesterday's race at Indy Motor Speedway, look, not a ton of passing, not a ton of ability to make moves on the racetrack. Obviously, a lot of strategy and a lot of fuel mileage and a lot of pit stops and track position being key in qualifying as well, which I'm generally okay with. Like, I'm understanding of the fact that not every race is going to be high flying, wide open, everybody making crazy moves up and down the racetrack. And I think it's fine. You have 36 of these things, right? There's a fine mix of strategy races versus driver skill wide open races versus, super speedways versus road courses and all the stuff we've talked about in the past. Did Indy go a little far there? Yeah, it was tough. Like, I would at least rather see tire wear matter a little more. And I know there's been some tire issues in the past, so they were maybe a little wary of it, but just not a lot of, ability for a driver to put it in their hands in the racetrack, right? And I think that's not what you fully want. So I will say this, and I'll be clear, I think they need to stay at the Oval at Indy. I think it's too historic. You heard, and that was kind of one of my big takeaways, you heard in the driver interviews, you heard Kyle Larson afterwards, you heard, other drivers that they talked to after the race talk about how much this one meant. Like, and more so than just, this would have been really big, our team needed to win, we're trying to get in the playoffs. No, it was like, this is Indy. I wanted to win here more than anything. And people talked, and we heard that in the interviews with the Xfinity Series drivers, with the Truck Series, which was over at the short track, and then with the Cup Series drivers. So this race matters, and I think it matters more to them that it's at the Oval, and it is, the Brickyard. You're kissing the bricks if you win this race, and, you're putting yourself in really one of the most historic racetracks in the history of the world. So all that being said, let's get into what I'm pretty upset about here. The blend line rule thing that came up early in the race when Chase Elliott got a penalty there, I don't have a huge problem with that. I will say it's clear that at least Chase Elliott didn't fully understand it enough. Now, is that on Chase? Yeah, maybe so, because you have a lot of other drivers in this field that didn't have any problems with it. Now, maybe some of them would have, but Chase was the first to get caught, and so then everybody got on the radio and said, hey, guys, keep in mind, this is the rule. You got to not blend back on the track there when you're going around. But in case anyone didn't see it, he blended back out on the racetrack, and you just can't do it. And so I don't know. I don't have a ton of fault there. I will say maybe NASCAR could be a little better communication-wise, and we're going to get to that theme again in a minute here. But, that one wasn't the one I'm going to focus on. And, Chase, with all that emotion showed, and look, it's been a little bit of a frustrating year for him, although he's been super, super consistent, hasn't quite gotten the wins that he would want to. So, maybe you heard a little bit of that coming out. As I mentioned, Indy 500 the Brickyard 400 seemed to mean a lot to a lot of these guys, and maybe that's part of it as well. But I didn't feel like the reaction from Elliott was fully justified based on what actually went down. So, with that being said, the next thing for me that's a real problem here is what happens down the stretch in this race where, Ryan Blaney is on the top line. He's restarting second. Brad Keselowski's the control car. Fuel mileage is a factor. We know Keselowski's probably going to be short on fuel. And Keselowski pulls off because he doesn't have enough fuel. Larson fills that spot, which I don't really have a problem with, but Blaney is the control car now, and that is the rule. And I understand this one again. It is really tough because there is such a small window of when Keselowski pulls off the racetrack to when they're going to take this green flag. But somebody, in my opinion, in NASCAR's got to let Blaney know right away. Hey, you're the control car now, Blaney. You can go, because he didn't know. It's it seems that way. And maybe we'll get some clarifying questions later in the week, and maybe we'll find out he did know and he just was frustrated. I don't know. It didn't seem like he knew. Larson kind of said it didn't feel like Larson didn't fully know either who the control car was. And then Blaney, of course, kind of throws a fit about the fact that they didn't stop the race. I don't think they need to stop the restart. I don't think you need to re-rack this thing. Again, I actually probably would have been more upset if they'd called a caution, called the restart off because of Keselowski pulling off the pit road, and reset it. Because think about it. You have another lap for the choose rule. Then you have another lap to take the green flag. You're going to have 5 miles around this track. The cars who are going on fuel mileage are now, in a bad spot because of it. So, I'm fine with them throwing this green flag. I just feel like NASCAR needs to really try to find a way to communicate quickly to Blaney. And maybe that's not possible with how, again, this was like a matter of 10, 15 seconds here. But he didn't know, and that hurts his chances. And eventually, may have cost him an opportunity to get the win in this race. Before that, I want to backtrack a little bit. Man, I wish this one would have stayed green, because as much as I said this race didn't have a whole lot of entertaining aspects of it, a lot of drivers that couldn't make moves, we had a really organic, fascinating scenario coming up down the stretch there, where you had Keselowski, Blaney, and Larson battling 1, 2, 3, but we know, or we think, Keselowski's going to run out of fuel. So then you have Blaney in second, who's going to be good, and then Larson, who's faster than both of them, and you're thinking to yourself, can Larson make a move on Blaney, but is Keselowski actually going to run out of gas? And if he does run out of gas, is that the chance for Larson to make the move? I was loving the way these last 10, 15 laps were playing out. Unfortunately, with whatever it is, a handful of laps to go, you get the caution that comes out away from that action, and it kind of resets everything, and then it gets us to what we just talked about. But I thought there was a chance for a really interesting scenario. Maybe it's going to play out pretty vanilla, and it's going to be Keselowski runs out of gas and Larson can't pass Blaney because nobody could pass all day. Maybe that's what's going to happen, but I felt like with the aggression, with the desire to win this race as big as it is, I thought we were going to see some fireworks there, especially depending on when and where Keselowski ran out of fuel. But ultimately, we don't get that finish, and we have to, kind of go with these overtimes or these restarts at least. And here's the one I'm just frustrated by the most. Next restart after the red flag, Larson takes it. He's going to be clear here. But then you have Ryan Preece spin on the backstretch, and looks like he's pretty beat up, pretty bent out of shape, that car is. He starts to roll it a little bit, but here's the deal. You're still not even, again, this is a 2.5-mile track. They're still not even into turn 3 when all this is happening. So you have so much time, if you're NASCAR, to remember, if they get back to the white flag, it's going to be race over on the next one. They wait and they wait and they wait, and Preece has 2 flat tires. You can see that on the camera shot, and they still wait. They let him cross the checkered, the start-finish line, to get the white flag, and then they call the caution afterwards. Really frustrated by that. And again, NASCAR's been, I think, so much better making these decisions in the last couple seasons. They've really started to show you the consistency. They've started to be a little bit more upfront and open about it, when they want to leave the race green, what they're trying to do, what they're looking for. And it was pretty obvious that Ryan Preece wasn't going to get to the back, get back in to pit road or to, a little area where he could kind of duck off the track and be out of the way. He's in the middle of, the racetrack. And so obviously you had to call a caution once they get to turn 1, because he's still sitting there. Just was not happy with the way that played out, and thought we should have gotten one more restart. I don't know if it changes the result. I think Larson probably wins either way. Again, it was just such an advantage to be the control car on the inside line on a restart. But I just didn't, wasn't a fan of the way. And look, what we also might have gotten is some cars run out of gas, and maybe some more fuel mileage entertainment after that as well. So, I understand what NASCAR's scared of. What they're scared of is what we've seen in the past, is they call a caution, and then Preece starts rolling, and he drives the car back to pit road. And you go, wow, that was a caution for that, and he's fine. But you had time this time. It was a rare instance where you had a lot of time. And so I think they got that one wrong, and I think it's unfortunate. But with that being said, like I just mentioned, I don't think it really impacted things too much. I think Larson was going to win this thing after, the whole other restart debacle with Blaney. So just not my favorite, not a big fan of the way this thing went down in the end. But all things considered, I do want to go back to the Xfinity race a little bit. I know we don't talk about that as much, but that was an unbelievable finish with Almirola coming around the outside out of nowhere with 2 teammates battling earlier. I mean, just so much happening in the final 2 laps of that race. that's what gave you hope. Now, they're just such different packages, and we know that. These cars are just not the same, and the Cup cars are not going to race the same as the Xfinity cars. And so it's almost used to feel like you go to a weekend and say, well, let's see how the Xfinity race is, and that'll give us a good gauge on what the Cup race is going to be like. It's really not like that anymore. I mean, again, you've had some bad races in Xfinity lead to some great Cup races, and you've had some great Xfinity races with some boring Cup races. So we'll see. We'll see what happens moving forward, but I mean, man, you think about the fact that you have the Olympic break here and you look at the playoffs. Another repeat winner in Kyle Larson, which means now if you have one win, you are in the playoffs. So congrats, Daniel Suarez. You're in. You don't have to stress about the unlikely possibility that you had more than 16 winners. You've only got a handful of races before the playoffs here, so this is not really like a halfway break. It is more like the MLB All-Star Game, even past that. It's the home stretch, and this will be a really... I think NASCAR driver. I think the way the schedule's set up, it's unfortunate that you don't have much time off at all during the season. So these drivers and teams, really, pit crews and crew chiefs and guys working working in the shop, they've got a couple weeks now to reset, which is not something they usually have at this point in the season. So how does that come into play? How do those engine shops sit back and go, what are we going to do heading into the playoffs? How are we going to make some adjustments, make some changes to try and give our drivers an advantage? I think all that's going to play out really, really well, and I think it should be fun. So we'll have a couple weeks off. I believe we'll come back with Richmond, and who knows? I don't even have a clue to pick a winner there with especially some of the stuff that's going to be going down. I guess give me Ryan Blaney just because of all the bad luck he's had recently. Maybe he can catch some good luck. But it'll be fun. It will be fun. So the NASCAR Cup Series rolls on, and 4-Tire Change will sign out for now. Appreciate everybody, and continue to like, subscribe, and comment. And Cup Series playoffs will be here before we know it.